Since October 7th, the only place that has felt remotely right to be in is the Temple Micah sanctuary on Shabbat. For anyone that's known me for an extended period of time, this probably would come as a surprise. When I was ordained as a rabbi in May, my long-ago teacher from Sher Emeth Preschool in St. Louis, Missouri, reached out, pleasantly startled and amused that I'd become a rabbi because she recalls that I was a very easygoing preschooler with the sole exception of all school Shabbat services, where I would mysteriously burst into tears every week. I'm a Hebrew school dropout, and although I did love going to synagogue during the high holidays, it wasn't because I was drawn to the prayer book. Rather, the kids and the teenagers of Chabad secretly gathered in the basement to play poker during services, using fruit roll-ups and Oreos as betting tokens. I love being Jewish. More seriously, I obviously really do love being Jewish, but this love was not established in a sanctuary or even a classroom. My love for Judaism was caught like a piece of challah ripped straight off the hot loaf, dabbed in too much salt, and haphazardly thrust across the table by my grandfather. My love for Judaism was largely discovered in the streets of Israel, only really decipherable as the quiet dusk of Shabbat set in, after the stores and markets closed, when the loudest noise is the sound of footsteps on stone, quiet giggles, Kabbalat Shabbat songs flowing out from cracked open windows, when the loudest sound is the smell of the neighbor's Shabbat cooking. In Israel, where Palestinians and Israelis run into each other in the rawness, where they hug and kiss and complain about how expensive artichokes are this season. In Israel, where in the middle of a desert rave party, the headliner plays an electronic Mizrahi version of a traditional Shalom Aleichem melody, and everyone knows the words, and everyone jumps, and everyone hugs, and everyone sings, and nobody has to pretend, and no one has to try to make it prayer. So why am I a rabbi here and not in Israel? Israel, this place that uplifts the depths of my spiritual soul. Because in Israel, the Judaism that I love, grounded in tradition, culture, and ritual, is not called Reform Judaism or Progressive Judaism. It's called secular Judaism. Because in Israel, the majority of officially religious institutions require me to sit behind a wall or barrier literally further away from the Torah or the main event. Because in Israel, being a rabbi means being an expert on studying and communicating Jewish law, which many Orthodox communities bar women from. It's not difficult for me to understand why I am one of the very, very, very few Sephardic Israeli female Reform rabbis in the world. In Israel, I feel ashamed to tell people I'm a rabbi because I know as much about Judaism and as much about Jewish law as an 11-year-old yeshiva boy. I hate the disapproving glances I receive from Israelis, as if dedicating my career to Jewish learning and community building is somehow offensive because of my gender and my relationship with the modern secular world. I cannot count the number of times Israelis have looked at me with confusion and skepticism before saying, "Don't you want to get a real job?" I am also half Ashkenazi and half American. It's not that I don't deal with misogyny and closed-mindedness in the United States. And it's not that the role of progressive religion is more simple or clear-cut here either. But in Israel, the land where it literally rains for the first time in months, every year around the same time, Jews worldwide adjust our liturgy to pray for it. The place that is fundamentally connected with our traditions and stories, the place where I feel most myself, most my Jewish self, and close to an ongoing human experience and covenantal story, there, misogyny is extra painful and bewildering. Similarly, when ultra-nationalist leadership and rhetoric is picking up speed around the world, I am most disappointed by its presence in the Jewish state. It is extra painful when people who have the same traditions and traumas as me use our shared narrative to incite violence against other people who call the land homeland. I do not minimize or turn away from the suffering or displacement of Palestinians, and I oppose the radical Orthodox Jewish government that supports settlement expansion and the disintegration of Arab citizen rights. I oppose the priorities of Bibi Netanyahu's corrupt government from the depths of my soul, and I hate the way this war is unfolding, if only just for personal reasons. I want to hold the Jewish state to a higher standard than any other country in the world. I want to hold it to the highest standard of morality and goodness and tolerance and creativity. Yesterday was the 11th of Cheshvan, Yitzhak Rabin's yahrzeit. Today is the 12th of Cheshvan. We are tormented by the unresolved realities of Israel in memory and in real time. Israel is complicated for all the people who inhabit it. One person or one group of people's narrative is not more relevant than the next, and no one is going anywhere. As if buzzwords like colonialism or apartheid can be applied to a nation of refugees in order to reveal the true villain, the clear human party deserving of death, eradication, and displacement, as if white supremacy accurately describes a population composed of Arab, African, and Asian Jews who were exiled from their countries of origin, along with Bedouins, Druze, and millions of Muslim and Christian Palestinian citizens of Israel, with a minority population of people who can be described as white, many of whom escaped pogroms or the Shoah in recent history. In American Jewish communities today, anti-Zionism is being worn like a badge of honor, signaling progressive values and a righteous position against universally evil forces. While in Tunisia, today, non-Zionist Jews, the very, very small group of people that decided to stick it out in Tunisia instead of moving to Israel, are suffering as their Torahs are destroyed and their synagogues burnt down today. Not all people have the privilege of wearing anti-Zionism as a badge of honor. Allyship is defined by people outside of an oppressed group leveraging their privilege to bear witness, listen, and lift up humanity by amplifying voices of people who have been silenced or harmed. The same week that Israeli civilians were raped, tortured, and kidnapped, the weeks of Israeli civilians of all colors and all religions, Israeli citizens who live in periphery towns known to face socioeconomic disparities compared to the rest of the country, the same week these humans were slaughtered and abducted was the week people unaffected by the violence in the land decided that my voice represents the oppressor because of an Israeli identity which I did not choose. My Tunisian family, brought up in the extremely poor town of Ramleh in the center of Israel, inhabited by Jews as well as Christian and Muslim Palestinians with equal Israeli citizenship, our voices are irrelevant. People unaffected by the violence in the land feel empowered to call the shots and terms, and allyship doesn't apply to us. I don't get it. Westerners are tearing down posters of civilians taken hostage by a terrorist organization. A terror organization that directly jeopardizes Palestinian safety and freedom. People who even remotely support the actions or rhetoric of Hamas, yet believe they are not condemning the entire Jewish population to eradication, are not listening. This week does not only mark the anniversary of Yitzhak Rabin's murder, it also marks the 5-year anniversary of the Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh. We are not only tormented by the realities of Israel in memory and in real time, but the realities of being Jewish everywhere on the face of the planet in memory and in real time. The conflict in Israel and Palestine is not a straightforward conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. because Israeli does not mean one thing and Palestinian does not mean one thing. Cycles of pain, violence, oppression, and extremism perpetrated by many different groups on opposite ends of countless national and religious spectrums have impacted every inhabitant of the land. Most narratives and claims are historically certifiable. Everyone has facts that prove their validity and their oppression. I ascribe to certain narratives, and I simultaneously do not believe that my claim is stronger than anyone else's. And this perspective itself is a product of my own Western privilege. So when I see people who do not live anywhere near the strip of land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea using slogans poorly translated from languages they do not speak, directly or indirectly advocating for the eradication of any human in the land, I am dismayed. I don't know how to interact with this hate. Blatant or internalized, well-read or ignorant, coded or direct, I don't know how to combat it. I don't know how to lessen it. I don't know how to educate it out or empathize with it out. I am learning that truth cannot always penetrate hate, and this is very confusing for me. And despite this pain, with this pain, carrying confusion and existing amidst fear and uncertainty, the Temple Micah Sanctuary on Shabbat has been one of the few places I've wanted to be. Beyond the fact that I love Temple Micah, which is a conversation for a different day, Jewish community in general is where I want to be. Since October 7th, every Jewish space I've entered has had a certain kind of intense energy in it, and gathering during this time feels significant and powerful. In this atmosphere of heightened fear and pain, something about sitting together on a Friday, evoking images of Egypt, Mitzrayim, symbolizing our bondage in biblical literature and the powers of the world that inevitably fail us in prophetic literature, something about sitting together on a Friday night hits differently. Something about embracing and wishing each other at least a moment of peace, a moment of shalom set apart from the rest of the week hits differently. In 1944, American Jewish poet, essayist, and political activist Muriel Rukeyser published a poem titled "To Be a Jew in the 20th Century." In 1944, she writes, "To be a Jew in the 20th century is to be offered a gift. If you refuse, wishing to be invisible, you choose death of the spirit, the stone insanity. Accepting, take full life, full agonies, your evening deep in a labyrinth blood of those who resist, fail, and resist, and God reduced to a hostage among hostages. The gift is torment. Not alone the still, torture, isolation, or torture of the flesh. That may come also. But the accepting wish, the whole and fertile spirit as guarantee for every human freedom, suffering to be free, daring to live for the impossible. Daring to live for the impossible. On October 7th, the morning that the atrocities of the season were beginning to unfold, we began our Shabbat morning service singing Hatikva. As we sang, I thought about all the different contexts in which I've sung Hatikva before, our anthem of hope. On Israeli Independence Day in the streets of Jerusalem, at summer camp in Bennington, Indiana, with Indian Jews in Mumbai. All around the world, these experiences, marked by Hatikva as a musical motif, have contributed layers of joy, pride, and solidarity to my understanding of Jewish story and Jewish identity. Each time I have sung Hatikva since October 7th, it has also added a new depth. But these layers are characterized by fear and pain. And yet, I am finding that these uncomfortable and difficult feelings still do not negate the central sentiments of hope. In this week's Torah portion, God enters a relationship with Abraham, the first Jew, revealing that to be in eternal covenant requires circumcision. While people with uteruses are by nature in a blood covenant with the eternal, in this week's Torah portion, Abraham makes his connection official when he circumcises himself, signaling, in part, that Jewish covenant is characterized by pain. Our psalmists apply the concept of circumcision to a different part of the body, an uncircumcised heart. They describe someone with an uncircumcised heart as having a mouth but not being able to speak, having eyes but not being able to see, having ears but not being able to hear, and so on. In other words, an uncircumcised heart is one that is sheltered from the realness and the rawness of life. Right now, as Jews, we are facing the most violent events our people have experienced since the Holocaust. We are exposed to a realness and rawness of the Jewish experience that we usually only allude to. Although we carry the story of our persecution and struggle everywhere, although we had a prayer for captives before Hamas kidnapped Israeli citizens, although we built our ritual lives around artifacts that represent precarity, broken glass, poems about narrow places, cracks in waning walls, faded photographs, now we confront our covenant with God characterized by a collective pain. Now. And we will still continue lighting Shabbat candles together, feeling tangibly the ways in which these realities inform each other. I don't know how to deal with hate, but I know that we have done it before. And as this new, colder season enters, we will do it again. Together, we navigate firsthand a full spectrum of what it means to be a Jew, and it strikes me as a particularly beautiful and powerful time, daring to live for the impossible. May we find wisdom, connection, and meaning al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, in the honey and the sting, al hamar ve'hamatok, in the sweetness and the bitterness, al bitenu hatinoket, shmor eli hatov. $6.51. Shabbat shalom.